Ready, ready, ready. Hello everyone. On this video, I want to share with you how you can build cycle plots natively in Power BI. As you can see on screen, we're going to be building that chart just using the line visual from Power BI. Now, first thing is that this chart is known as cycle plots, but it also has another name, which is seasonal subseries graphs, as you can see here on screen. Okay. Another name is month plot if you talk to the art folks, or subseries plot, and seasonality chart. The very basic essence of the chart is just to show that seasonality of your data set. Now, before proceeding building the chart, I do want to go and step back a little bit and show some theory to see or how we get to this point, or how is it that we read it or interpret it. Now let's go here to the first page, and here you see in a line visual a very basic line chart that we see commonly. And let me just show you the data or the data model for this. It's a basic, very basic model. Here we have a calendar table and connected to a fact table that is containing 4 data sets that we're gonna be working, just to show different examples and how the cycle plot shows different different views according to each individual data set. Now the connection here is one to many, as you can see. One to many, going from the calendar table to the fact table. And they're connected on period on the fact table to the date column on the calendar table. Now if we just go real quick just to see the view of the calendar, very basic, very commonly, with the essence of having the column. This is important to know or to have, is that you need the month name, okay, and then sorted this by this corresponding for month column or the month number column. What also you also need from here, you also need from the calendar table to have a year column, okay, because this is what you're gonna also put on the visual. And then on the fact table here, real quick, is, as you can see, very basic, just a data set, okay. I have named 4 data sets with different names. And then the set order is this for the slicer, but then there's just a normal value, okay, and then the period. Now the period is important because I'm just using the first of the month for each individual value that you see here. Just this is, for example, for March, and the following is from April, and so on, just using the first of each month. And that's important because the data model, that's how I'm connecting the 2 tables. And also on this line visual, now we can proceed to that, I'm using actually the period column right here, which is coming from my date table right here. And this column right here is just using the first of each month. If I go real quick to the data table and just click on dates, we can see that I'm using this column right here, which is only using the first of each month for this day column, which is actually sort of like your primary key on your calendar. All right, with all that said, we're all clear. I'm plotting the period over here, putting that. And then on the values for the y-axis, I'm bringing it from the DAX column, which is gonna be this basic sum right here. Oh, maybe I'm just using the tooltip, and now we can just see it there. And now if I just show you real quick, the formula is very basic. It's just a basic sum of my value column on my dataset table. And then this I'm gonna explain later, but it's just basically just to plot where there is data up to the last months of data according to the dataset. All right, so with that said, and just in case, I'll go in further detail about that if dates with value, kind of like a parameter, okay, in a little bit. And here, as I said again, this is a basic line chart. Here we're seeing the cycles pretty much in a very evident way, that is going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. But it's very hard to sort of detect patterns on this. Though the only patterns that we see is up and downs and up and downs. And on a very raw level or very high level view, we can see that data is sort of decreasing if we grab something like an average here, and then it leads to its lowest point here, and then it starts to increase again. And I'm just saying, or how can I tell? Because I'm using kind of like the minimums here, which is this, this, and also the peaks, they're getting higher too. So I can just, this kind of like confirms me that we're going through a rebound phase. Now, if I go to another data set right here, look at this. I'm also seeing the cycles up and down, 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 and I can see very highly, highly, overview, or maybe like eyeballing it, is that yeah, the data seems to be increasing, although it's not so evident. But I can again see, just using the peaks, that they're getting higher on sort of each cycle. Okay, on the last two cycles, you can see that the peak or the last peak got higher than this one over here. All right, but I don't know which month this peak is happening. So that's also thing about line charts, that it's not so evident. Now let's go see another data set here, which is the sea ice extent. And just in case I didn't mention the name of the other data sets, but basically one of the first one was very saying sales are recovering, because you can see that the sales were going down and then up. Then the sales are rising, even though it doesn't look so evident, but once we go in the cycle plot, you will see. And then the sea ice extent, we can see that it has a very general pattern, or a general trend that is going down. It's hard to tell, but we kind of like eyeballing it, see a little bit. I can also use the minimums right here, and you can see that they're getting lower and lower. Sorry if I say higher, I meant lower. And then the last data set, this says April and May are down, though I can see that there's a dip here and then a rebound. I just don't know which month, but I'll tell you that the reality behind this data set is it's actually sales data set that I had, or I work with, and that's deep that you see, or the deep that you see here is actually the pandemic. Now the rebound is actually driven by online sales. So this data set that is April and May down is actually real. I did take out the context, or what is it about, just to keep the values and keep this tutorial simple. All right. So the other thing, lastly, is that okay, the name of the data set is called April and May down, but it's hard to tell how is it that April on every year is going down, and also as May as well. It's hard to tell. We can see that maybe the data set is, or the data is trending a little bit upward on the last month, but yeah, not so evident prior to that. Okay, all right. So what can we do? So if we go back to the first data set, sales recovering, what we could do, the first proposal, just to see this in a different angle, a different perspective, is that we can actually grab the values for year 1986, sorry, and actually separate it, and then grab the values from 87 and then 88, which probably could be like this, and actually put them or superpose them on a same visual, meaning that we're gonna replace this axis with month of the year, January through December. And then each line is gonna be a separate year. So how would that look? Like this. And as you can see, now, for example, for this same data set, we have several lines, and the legend kind of like helps out to know which line correspond to, but not so much, to be honest. But at least we know that, for example, for this blue line that we see here, it's actually 86, because that's easy kind of to match. But if I click on the legend, that's a cool feature on Power BI, that you can click on the legend and it will highlight that that's the line that you see there. Perfect. And we have switched the axis. Now we're talking about January through December. January through December. And then each year is a different line that correspond to. Now, what I can see from this view is that I can see that for this data set, it seems like on every year, within the year, sales go from January and starts to increase to April. You can see that happening on all the months. Maybe having gone through a little bit of a dip from January to the February, and then rebounding, okay, within the year. And then we can see that the sales are starts to decrease all the way up to September. We can see those downward slopes. They're not so evident. That's why the cycle plot makes them to be more clear, to be more evident. And also then again an upward slope to October, and then we can see that December is actually the lowest month, or actually compared to January, and we can see that they start to increase from October all the way to December. Now let's go see another data set from this view. This is a little bit more evident, more grouped than you can think. And then we can also see that, for example, the sales are from January through March, all of them are increasing, except one year maybe that had a little bit of a dip here. Then they decrease to May, to April, and then they increase to June, okay? Every year, the sales within every year from April to June, they increase, okay, from April to June, and then they decrease all the way to December, actually being December the lowest month of sales, okay, compared to June, compared to January, okay, as you can see. Now let's go to the other one, which is the sea ice extent. This one is even more grouped. We can see more like a spaghetti spaghetti chart on this, but it's more evident that we can see that this September, and this is why you hear the term month of the year effect when you talk about cycle plots, because I really want to show you which month are the most sales, or the highest values, or the lowest values on every year. Okay, so let me put that again. Sorry, which month on every year is actually either the highest or the lowest values. And here we can see it for this data set that September it is, and then maybe March and February are the highest, and then you can see the trend or the pattern repeats itself, going from February and March all the way down to September. Maybe the red, you can't see it there, and then rebounding again. And that's what makes it to show the seasonality, the cyclical pattern, that things repeat every year on the same month. There is a behavior that happens, and you can see it clearly on this chart. Now, if we go to the other one, which is April and May, it's interesting. We see a bunch of lines grouped here, and then also here, but then there's one line that is like out of the norm, or like an outlier, and that year is actually 2020, because it's a year of the pandemic. If I click on 2020, we can see that actually this dip is because the stores were closed and sales were dramatically lowered. And then there's like a spike in July, because actually here in Peru, just to tell you that the sales increased a lot, because Peru had to like progress within month its e-commerce. A lot of new apps and services just started to pop up. All restaurants and supermarkets starting offering delivery to homes, since people couldn't go to the supermarkets or the shopping malls, so they had to offer that they can take the services, or they can take the groceries that you were purchasing to your house, to your home. So that's why they speak there. And also, higher sales continue throughout the year, so you can see that. But the name of the data set, just in case, is actually called April and May down. So it's very it's still very hard to see, well, how is it down compared to, now we can see it that May in 2020 is very low, compared to the other years. Okay, we see that, and April is also very low compared to the other years. So yes, it is evidence from this single view. But you know what? Let me just step back and then say, is it possible then to actually have another view where we actually can say, you know what? Let me replace the axis now with years, and each individual line is actually a month. Okay. And now for this plot, you will have 12 lines, and let's go to that right here on page 3. And here you go. Now we see 12 lines, and basically, sorry for that zoom in. Basically, we see for January, February, all the way to December, 12 lines in this section right here. And here's the interesting part, because now we can see for this data set of sales recovering, that the all the sales on, for example, let me see, just click on January. I can see and click it again. January, we can see how January behave across the years, just January on that line. And since I'm clicking it on the legend, I can see that, sales went up from 86 to 87. Then they went down all the way to 89, but then it had a very low point, or the lowest point, in 1992. So I can see more evident, how each individual month moved or varied or fluctuated across time, across the year, because that's what's on my x-axis. My years are on my x-axis, and I'm putting it here from the calendar table. Maybe let's just open that and open the calendar table. And this is, I'm placing the year here on the x-axis, and then the month on the legend, which is this one right here. And then, yes, that's it, pretty much. And now let's go see another month. Maybe let's go see September. And September is also, maybe November better. Or I'm just trying to pick a different color. Also, we see the same trend, similar a little bit to like January, that is going all the way down, but the lowest point is actually on 91, and then it rebounds again. Let's go see another data set. For example, sales keep rising. Here, for example, very simplistic. We doesn't tell us much, but it does tell us that on every month, across time, across the years, sales are very increasing. But look at that, the steepness or the slopes are, there you can eyeball it that they're increasing, but it's not so clear, not so evident. Let's go see another data set here, the sea ice extent. And also look at this. You can see, it's something that is simple. It's I would say banal, that you can't tell any trends or patterns here, trying to find the cycle. In the other view, we did have that they were more together, these lines. And then the last data set is that, okay, at least we can see that on this month right here, which is July. Let me click at it. We see that July on every year for this data set went all the way from a little bit lower than 150 all the way to over 250. And it actually increased year over year basis from 2019 towards 2020. So now the question is, can we combine these two views, this one and the previous one? Yes, we can. And actually, let's go to page 4. And this is what you have right here. Actually, you should have seen that visual. Let's just hide it real quick. And let's just put it like that. Because now, as you can see, we started with this view, which is the basic line visual across time, seeing the cycles, very, very evident. Then if we wanted to sort of have another view of separating each individual section of it, as you can see again, I'm just gonna remove that tooltip. That section and this section in one line visual, then that's what we're doing here. And then this for another line. And then the x-axis is month. And okay, and then the third version is this one where we actually inverting the axis and saying, well, show me the years on the x-axis, and each individual line is actually a month right here. So a month. So this is nice because now I can actually have a combination of these two views right here, these two views into one. And that's what is the cycle plot. And now let's show it. And sorry, it's already 20 minutes here and we haven't even started on making the visual, but actually making the visual is the most simple part of the tutorial, to be honest. Actually understanding the graphic is actually a bit harder because at first sight you can see the cycle plot and be a bit overwhelmed or confused. So I hope that me showing all these sort of versions or prior versions before arriving to cycle plots helps to understand these such simple, elegant, clever, and graphic that can reveal so much. Once you understand cycle plots, you will feel enlightened. So okay, so now we have the cycle plot here, and what we're doing on this section is actually, look, I'm actually saying, okay, I want you from this visual separate January. I want a January section. But on January, I actually want to see the values of January, which in this case will be this blue right here. So I want to see like the blue lines, on its separated section of January. And that's what we're seeing here, as you can see. Okay, we got January here, and then this line chart that is from this visual, it is going on this line right here. And as you can see, it will repeat itself for the other month. So this is what's very nice. It's a combination of the two visuals on the top and to the left of the cycle plot combined. Now, for example, if I were to click on July here, I would say July that is highlighted here, as you can see. And then we're seeing it again, the same shit, but because this visual is taller and the x-axis is very narrow, we can see that it's steeper right there. But this is just, again, and it's rebouncing. But then again, it's just because the visual here is being stretched. But as you can see, it's all related. Now, the cool thing about this, and to be honest, is actually where I really feel that the cycle plot makes it very elegant on its design, is that it's easy to read it. Now I know, for example, that on every year, sales are rebounding. Actually, not on every year, on every month. So you can see a rebounds, a rebounds, a rebounds, a rebounds, and a rebounds, and you can keep going all the way going up. Here you see the same thing. You see the same thing, but because of the color encoding, it just becomes a very of a spaghetti chart. So it is not so evident. And now if I change the data set to this one, for example, now look at this. This is even very evident that, for example, when we saw this version, okay, the time series by year, we noticed that, okay, from January, sales increased to March, okay, on every year. Then they increase further on June, but then they decrease all the way to December. And then this December, since I'm gonna plot Decembers of all the years, okay, into its own section, then it's confirmed right here. It's so evident, because I have isolated just the December values on its own section. And then you can immediately just tell, wow, December is our lowest month, okay? That's our seasonality, and that's an aspect of seasonality compared to the highest month on every year, which is June. Even after a rebounds here in 1992, and then the highest value in all these data set being in about 80, hitting it here on the month of June. And if I now click on this June on this legend, let's click it real quick. Now we can see that that value of 80 is there, which is confirmed by that. Oh, sorry. I want to drive a box here. And that's the value that you see here. Sorry for this. You can see that this tooltip, but it's that value right there. So as you can see, different, a more clear view, but without clicking, you can see it right there. It's a very high, I think a big picture view, the cycle plot. It really gives you that, a very nice big picture that allows you to see the overall pattern of the seasonality along with the trends of the subseries, meaning in this case the month. That's why also it's named seasonal subseries graphs. Seasonal because they want us to show you seasonality. Subseries because at the end, its design is so clever and so simple. Actually, its simplicity its simplicity makes it so elegant, and that's why I think it's a highly valuable graph to know on your toolkit, because it can reveal so much information in a tiny space, without feeling overwhelmed, without feeling information overload. Sorry. All right. Last thing though, I do want to make a match. Oh, sorry for that zoom in. I want to make a match between this chart and this chart for educational purposes. Why? Because sometimes also it really helps to see, well, how can I see which values are being plotted here compared to what's being plotted here, since they both are showing the same information but from different lenses, from different perspectives, from different angles. So I have built this page right here, page number 5. And here I'm just gonna deactivate this because it was already filtered. And as you can see, we have the cycle plot for the first data set, which is sales recovering. And what I'm gonna do here on this visual below is that I actually wanna highlight the January month, okay, on each individual year, okay, right here. So now let's click on January, for example, and now we can see that the January values are being highlighted, okay, and you can see them right here, right here, right here on every year, okay. Now this is interesting because as you can see, look at the pattern. It goes up a little bit, then down, and then up and down, down, hitting the lowest point in 1992, and then rebounding. And here we see the same, information, okay, just a little bit more pronounced because the space for the line visual is more stretched, but we're seeing the same information, and here the width for this line visual is wider. But this is interesting now because now let's say I switch to maybe June, and now June actually shows me that those are the peaks, right here. Okay, this is interesting. I like the peaks of these line visuals, and they correspond to this month right here. But what's interesting though is that June for this data set is actually potentially not on average, on a year-over-year average, which is a metric that I'm careful with it for cycle plots, but it's very common to see a graph on cycle plots that the average potentially is higher for April right here. And if we click April right here, we may see that the peaks, as you can see, they shifted a little bit. Sorry for the zoom in. And they are actually touching potentially the highest points on this data set right here. Let's maybe switch it to maybe see when sales keep increasing. And here, for example, it's interesting because now I'm gonna click on January, and as you can see, January, for example, we can see where it's been highlighted, and we can see that it's trending and then dipping on 1992, which is that dip that you see here, and then it just rebounds back and it keeps increasing, and that's what you're seeing here. Now let's go and click June, for example, and now June is showing me the peaks. This makes sense, and it correlates with the cycle plot because it's actually the month with the highest sales on every year, and you can see that it's actually the peaks. And if I click on December, now for example, we can see that yes, it matches with the cycle plot that you see, which the lowest or the floor or floor point of each point right here. Sorry, I'm being messed up with Summit a little bit, but yeah, right here, right here, right here, right here. And this is interesting. Now let's just click one more, the sea ice extent. As you can see, look at that. It's very difficult to see which months correspond for the line visual below, but it is so evident if I use the cycle plots and see that. And this is nice because now when I started with the first part of patterns, here I can see that the pattern for the sea ice extent is decreasing on every month. It's actually trending downward every year, okay, or across time. On every month is trending downward in hitting, with the seasonality pattern or behavior. The September is the lowest point, and it is also trending downward. And because this data set is dealing with the sea ice extent, which is actually a real data set also, this could be alarming for people that deal with the climate change topics and all that. This is a little bit alarming because it seems like the sea ice extents are getting lower, meaning that the ice is melting, that throws water to the oceans and to the seas, and that brings many other problems that could be catastrophic. Now let's just go for the last data set, which is May and April down, just to see how evident the cycle plot makes it. So look at that. Wow. And now let's just click on April here, because look, now I can understand why I wanted to call that data set April and May down, because it really shows me on the cycle plot that the last year of data, it just had the dip. But we know that this is related because of the pandemic. And then on May, it's also another month where the last value, it was also a dip. If we click May real quick here, we see that May, we can see it here is kind of like the peaks on the data set, but then it actually be very low on 2020, and we see it here. But look at the pattern here though, and that's also why the cycle plot can reveal those subseries trends, is that May and April are the 2 months only that have a downward or decreasing trend. As you can see, decreasing, going down, while the other ones, and I'm gonna paint them in blue, they're increasing or upward trend, as you can see. It's so evident, so evident. That's why I wanted to call this data set, which is real, that May and April are actually down. And from here, we went from series, a series plot to a cycle plot. And that's the name of the title right here. Didn't want to overlook that. So now we arrived to the example after 31 minutes. And I apologize for this, but I really wanted to share some theory. So when you understand how to build this, which is actually the most easiest part of the tutorial, that you understand how cycle plots came to be, okay, where they come from, that makes uh, the possibility to show seasonality so simple or in a very clever and elegant way. So now what we want to do here is actually build these cycle plots from scratch. So we're gonna open a new worksheet. You'll see it is so very simple. Let's just put example here. And actually, the first thing that we need to do, oh, sorry for that zoom in. I always get confused with the keystrokes for my zoom in tool. Let's put it red. I'm actually gonna bring this and bring it towards the canvas. So click on the line visual. Let's just make this line visual a little bit bigger, okay? Put it in the center. We need to bring the slicer. The slicer is gonna be this one right here, which is coming from my dataset table. Just gonna collapse this because I'm gonna be on this corner. And actually this, we're gonna bring it from the dataset table. Just gonna copy that slicer to save time. And I'm just gonna paste it right here. Don't sync, yep, right here, right next to it. Maybe I'll make this line visual just to be a little bit smaller. And now click on the line visual and then collapse the dataset, open your calendar table. And again, what you're gonna need is two columns. You're gonna need to place the year column on the x-axis and then the month column or month column name, depending on which one you want. I usually recommend to pull the sorry, English is my second language, the short version of the month name. You don't want to pull January and to be all January apparent. You just want to use the the first three letters of each month. So now we go here and we throw in month name all the way on the small multiples section. But I'm just gonna scroll down a bit here and now drag it and place it right here on small multiples. And the other thing that we want to do is actually to throw the measure that you want to plot. And for example, this case we're using total values right here, but it's conditioned, it is conditioned by something that I'm putting here, which is called the month with value. Let's just check that measure real quick. And again, what you're seeing here is actually, I'm not sure why is it doing that, but I'm not sure why. Yeah, I'm not sure why is it strain it or make it horizontal. Sorry for that. But basically on this measure, I'm just doing this. Basically, whatever data set is selected on the slicer, which is this part right here, that's my variable. That I'm gonna run it through this calculate formula, okay, which is actually calculating what's the latest day with data or what's the last month with data. And for that, I go and do a max of the periods, but according to the data set that is selected, that's what's this line, then remove the filtering context. And then I calculate my first day visible from my calendar table, just a basic min. And then I do a Boolean logic here, which I tell just the result. Hey, look, from the first day visible, if it's less than or equal to the latest that with value, and that's gonna give me true and falses. And I'm gonna use that for the other measures here, like total values, and also right here, the averages and trend and minimum values, because I actually want those lines or those values to be plotted up to where there is data, not like on future dates where there's actually no data yet. So okay, now let's go and throw in that measure there and total values, and we're gonna put it on y-axis, and there we go. Pretty much now we just need to set up right here the configuration of the small multiples. So we go right here on the format tab, and right here on columns we want to increase these to 12. Before, and I just want to pause this, before the limitation it was up to 6 columns and that's it. But now I want to thank Miguel Myers and Matthew Lee. I'm not sure if they're gonna watch this video, but really want to thank them. They are from the Power BI design team from Microsoft. that thank you for allowing us to increase this up to 12 columns because it allows us to build a native cycle plot with Power BI. And this is amazing because it just offers us many possibilities of customization. For example, here I increase it to 12, but then I'm gonna increase this on one row. And as you can see, the cycle plot is right there already built. Now, there's of course, cosmetics here because as you can see that the year is getting repeated every time. This axis is very redundant because it's being repeated as also. So let's just clean that a bit. Let's collapse these small multiples and go to the section of the y-axis. On the y-axis, I actually gonna turn off the title. I'm also gonna maybe collapse this x-axis and go to y-axis and turn off the title. So as you can see, that one goes away from here, from this side. And I also turned out the year, which was over here. Now, let's step back a little bit and make those values of the y-axis right here, these ones, a little bit higher, along with this name of the month to be more prominent. So for this, we just collapse this range, open the values, increase this up to 12. 12, yep. And then collapse this and go to small multiples. Actually, go to x-axis and actually turn down the values right here. Because again, like I said, it is very redundant because it gets repeated every time for each section of the multiples. Now click on here, go to the small multiples here, and where we're gonna go is collapse layout and go to title. On title, we wanna put it at the bottom and we want it to be aligned in the middle. So click that, and that makes a little bit to be aligned with the center of each line. So as you can see right here, there we go. Yep, there we go. I just want to, I don't know. Okay, there we go. And then the other thing that we want to do is kind of like make a section or make a separation, so you don't have to eyeballing that. Okay, am I reading June or am I reading July? Okay, for that there's two options. You can either go with a border, click on the border, and actually on the border you can either go with a lighter color on the grays, and maybe you can make it like this. And I like it. It makes it it's its own section separated. But you can also do take off the borders, and you can also do background. And if you activate the background, do a light color like this one. And as you can see, maybe the transparency, you want to increase it to 80. And as you can see, maybe 80 is too low, maybe 70. And there you go. You can play around with it. This is another option. What I like about this option compared to the other one is that because the name of the month is inside its own corresponding rectangle, then it follows Gestalt principles, where everything that is enclosed belongs to the or we perceive it as belonging to the same group. So I think it's nice. It's a nice touch in that sense, that the label of the month is, and the label of the multiple is inside this area background or box. Okay, there we go. What else we want to do? We also want to go ahead and actually color the lines here. But what I want to actually wait, one last thing is that we want to increase these labels to be a little bit more prominent. Open title and increase this from 10 to 12 just to make it more prominent. There we go. Perfect. All right, now we can collapse this. And now the other thing that it's hard to tell, it is that right here, there's some space going on here, and we can actually reduce that space, meaning we can actually like sort of how do you call, pull or actually stretch the visual so it covers those spaces. In order to do that, we need to go to the x-axis, and actually we have to throw in a dynamic measure here on the minimum and maximums. Okay, so for that, those are these two measures right here, and I'm just getting a bit ahead of myself, so sorry for that, which is gonna be number 11 and 12. So what does 11 do? So if we click here on the x-axis minimum, I'm basically just telling it, look right here, I'm just basically telling it, and I'm just gonna zoom here, that give me what is the minimum period, okay, for the data set that I'm also selecting with the slicer, But actually, I want not the period, I actually want the year of the period. And that's why I add that year right there. And then for the max axis, it's the same thing, but instead of using min, I'm using the max. And that's what we placed on here on the measure. As soon as actually we go ahead and add it to, I'm sorry for that last zoom in, we add it right here on the FX button, FX. We actually gonna go in field value, open data, I mean DAX, and measure number 11. Okay. And as soon as we do that, you can see that the lines shifted a little bit towards the right. You didn't see it. Maybe if you want to replay the video, you will see that they shift a little bit. And also, if I did that for the minimum, the most proper thing to do is also do it for the maximum. And as you can see, measure number 12 for the max. And there we go. It just makes it to be dynamic. As soon as I click to another data set that probably have less years or more years, that axis or is gonna adjust accordingly, which is nice. And here now we want to add is the year over year average, which is very commonly to see on cycle plots, because pretty much it is saying what is the average of these values right here. So basically you want to draw a middle line here. Very common. But then again, I did mention previously that I was like, it's very common to see on cycle plots, but sometimes for some for some values, maybe a middle value could be coherent, makes sense. But for other values, set of values, maybe not, because for example, look at the range of that. We're going from potentially number 30 as a minimum, and also maybe above 80 on the maximum. And this is a big spread, to have a middle value as the average to be representative for the month. Just be careful about it. Just be careful, okay? Don't take it as the whole truth, but just be conscious that okay, it is common to plot it, but maybe also the trend or the median or maybe the quartiles could also help. In this case, we're gonna just do the average right here. Click it on number 3, which is gonna be this measure. Not sure why it's doing that. Okay, there we go. And basically here is the same pattern that is actually gonna repeat itself for the maximum, for the minimum. Okay, and as you can see, it's very basic. Here, what I'm telling it is like, hey, if go ahead, and this is gonna be for the dates with values, okay? And it's giving me true whenever it's actually gonna operate where there is actually data on the fact table. That's why actually I use it as a parameter. And then go ahead and proceed, if true, with the calculate on all this section right here. But then again, the internal operation is an average, okay? And it iterates, okay, on these table values, okay, which is the years, based on the measure of the number 2, which is actually my basic sum. So what you're doing here is actually going through all the years, iterating, and then making an average of all those values. And then with the filter context, with calculate, I actually remove it. And that's why you have the all selected, okay? And so I can have that value to stay constant across the year and actually get the horizontal line. With that said, let me now step back and right here and plot it over here year and put it right here on total values. And as you can see right there, we can see that line being more apparent right there, as you can see. And now what I'm gonna actually proceed is just with the year over year trend, because this one is a little bit intimidating at first sight. But this is actually a nice formula that it was developed by Daniel, and I always forget his last name. I'm very sorry, okay? Daniel, if you're watching this, well, probably are not, but my total respect, because thank you for sharing that formula. It's still amazing. When he developed that formula, and I'm talking about him just in case, Daniel Masluik or Luke. He's from Australia. When he developed that formula, we didn't have the function lightness. So that formula really was very helpful just for simple linear regression. And thank you, Daniel, for having sharing it with all the community and actually the world. So now you can actually, the line that I'm about to plot, which is actually this right here, this measure, is actually the trend, the year over year trend for each individual multiple. And this is the formula. Now, the formula is out there. You can find blogs about it. Here, I just adjusted it to this model and to this concept. So now this is what I'm gonna do. And sorry, I don't go into detail because else I will make this tutorial even longer just to explain this whole formula. But I think it is very nice to add the year over year trend because it actually adds more context to the cycle plot. Let's just actually go ahead and drop it here. As you can see, very hard to see because the color encoding is so poor, okay? But let's now fix this. Now collapse the x-axis, open line, go to line, go to color, or actually, yeah, go to color. But then on the series, we actually want to go to total values, and the total values we want to color it to be black. Then for the zero, and then the width, sorry, for the total values, which is my black line, okay, I actually want to decrease the width to be 2 points. Then I want to open the year over year average, and I actually want to switch the color to be gray right here. Not so invasive, not so prominent, but to be on the background without being so, without interfering with the other lines. And now for the year over year trend, I do want to color it in black, okay? And I actually want to make it the line style to be dash. And there we go. And maybe make it a width of 2 points. And there you go. As you can see, maybe though, very hard to see the trends. In this case, what did I use for my example that it was a little bit more evident? Well, actually, I didn't use it for this one. All right, I'm giving you a little bit of extra here, but it's okay. I did want to show it here. Maybe what we can do is actually for the year over year trend to increase the width to make it more prominent. And maybe for the, yeah, well, you still see it clearly there because they have a different encoding having the dash line, I hope. All right, now let's collapse this and check this out. This is what's nice of adding the trend, a simple linear trend though, because we can see, for example, that on every month, each month is increasing for this data set. Year over year, the sales are increasing month over month. I mean, actually, on each month, year over year, the trend is increasing. And you can just tell it, being actually June the steepest, and then maybe also December not being the steepest, but also corresponding that is actually the month with the lowest sales. And now if we go ahead and actually plot it with the CI extent, this is what's kind of interesting because here is very hard to see the trend. But if I increase my format, or actually I increase my options here, collapse the format, and actually click on the visual and actually bring the total values to tooltips section, look at this. Now we can see that the trend is more evident or more prominent because I have taken out the individual values. But here's interesting because as you can see, it just really show you the downward trend on each month. Each month is repeating itself, and this is, you know, what may be alarming because again, see the sea ice extend, the icebergs are melting, more water to the oceans, yeah, and that can lead to many other natural disasters. Now if we go to the last data set, which April and May down right here, we can see that look, the confirms the two trends in May and April going down, okay, but then for the rest of the month it's going up, 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 up. And actually being March, the month with a very very horizontal trend, almost horizontal, even closest to the average. Now how about if we actually bring back the values? So let's click on the visuals here and drop and pull it from tooltips all the way to where it was. And as you can see, okay, now we have the individual values, and now the trend, it is kind of very horizontal because of this last value right here, okay? And with this is pretty much the cycle plot, this very simple and elegant plot that I believe that can really just be very informative for your data analysis if you want to show or if you want to detect the seasonality. And one last thing as a very tip is that you can use it either to forecast sales, because now that you have the data set layout like this, you can go ahead and go enter into a discussion and say, well, where do we want our last for our following year's sales to be? Do we want to be above 40, and for February maybe a little bit over 50, and then maybe on March to be above 62 or 63? You can visually make projections because you see where the line potentially it is. Or maybe you can go ahead in April and say, we're not gonna make these sales. We know that, but at least we can try to make a sale over here, which is a little bit lower than the last year that you have the data plotted. And the other thing that you can use the cycle plot is to also use it to validate. Once you have your historical data set plotted like this, and then maybe you have some arithma forecasting model or Holt Winters forecasting, framework that you're using for your projections, and then you just want to see if those projections even make sense, or if either aggressive or not aggressive, and then you plot those projections here on a cycle plot and validate if maybe the projections could be right here, way up, it's just being too aggressive, or maybe the projection is all the way to here when when this line is trending up, it doesn't make sense that it's projecting the sales to be lower. So either to forecast or to validate. So I think cycle plots is interesting, and I tell you that tip, sorry, I just like hyped up a little bit, is because a client was doing that. I was so surprised. The client was actually using cycle plots for forecasting, and he told me, or she told me, or he, that the sales forecasts were being more accurate or were making more sense for their sales teams to meet their quotas, to meet their targets. So, short and true story. And that's it. Last thing I want to say with this is that it's part of this blog post. You probably find this video on this blog post right here. And my last thing I want to say is that let's see if we can make this plot more famous, more known, because it was invented 30 years ago by William Cleveland, and his colleague Turperding, in the 1982. But actually, there's some some historical registry that it was actually invented 4 years prior by the same people, by the same team, Cleveland and his colleagues at the Bell Labs, in 1978. And even though that's more than 30 years ago, this cycle plot or this graph is still not that famous, not so prevalent. And I hope my contribution about it really helps for that to become more known. I actually learned more about the cycle plots reading the 2 editions of William Cleveland's masterpiece, which is the Elements of Graphing Data. And there you go. The only last thing is that he switched the name of the same plot that he invented. He called it seasonal subseries graph, as I mentioned on the beginning of the video, to cycle plots. And that's why with different colleagues, sometimes we talk about the same plot, but they call it seasonal subseries, and I call it cycle plot. And the reason, because he changed the name in a window of 9 years between the first edition and the revised version, which is the lower here, edition, and he called it the same graph cycle plot. And that's it for this video tutorial. We made it with 55, a little bit under an hour, but I wanted to be transparent with the theory. I really wanted to show you, where cycle plots come from, so you can appreciate their elegance and simplicity to show seasonality and to even show more information about the data plotted. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.